Good morning, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this first Indic Book Club Writers Open House with Otis. And for those of you joining in for the first time, you know the drill. You register and you send in your writing piece that you want feedback on, and Otis will take a look at it, mark up his feedback, send it back to you. And what you are supposed to do is send it in the form of a PDF document in Times New Roman font, size 12, double spaced, approximately 800 words in length, and be sure to send it at least a few days in advance, if not more, so that Otis gets enough time to look at it and give us feedback and send it back. And then when we meet on Sunday, Otis goes through the submitted pieces and gives his not only his feedback, but also in general shares some points about writing that that piece is worth talking about. So with that preamble, and before I turn it over to you, Otis, I believe you said you had two pieces that you wanted to review, which is fine. I think given that it was the year end and all, people were taking a break. It's still good we have two pieces. Anvita's piece, please feel free to cover it anytime. As she said, that she has her exams coming up in a couple of days, so she may not be able to join, but I'll be sure to pass on that feedback to her. And we are recording this. So over to you.
I will do that story first. So yeah, let me share my screen, and then Ram has a story, and we'll do that story next. And we should. And there's always it's funny, even though the pieces are short, there's always a lot to cover. So there's a lot to learn from, no matter what. I mean, writing is just amazing that way. It reveals so much about us. It's this way to try and capture the imagination, and there's a lot lost in translation between the imagination and the words on the page. It's the biggest issue with writing, is that we have this sort of platonic ideal in our mind about what's going to happen, and then then we create these shadows on the cave wall that are like, I'm not so sure that's capturing it, but it's just a wonderful process. It's a great thing to do. Let's see, screen share, and I'm going to go to this. The wait is over. I don't know what.
Yeah, I can see a screen.
You have it? Okay, I want to get rid of that. Tidy up my area. Okay, so one thing, Ram, I want to say I want to applaud you for your file name, and that was great. Thank you so much. That makes my life so much easier, and better use of my time, definitely.
There are some advantages of being a trained accountant.
Yes, I think Ram, I think you might be able to give us all lessons in how to write a file name, and
I'll do that.
And also, you very nicely had both the title and your name on the front, which we'll see that this piece doesn't have. So those are just little things that make it wobbly for me, because I don't know what I'm dealing. I'm just trying to really solidify time. So that's really helpful, Ram, when you do.
I'll just put a small mail maybe, and I'll put it up on the Facebook page maybe with a small file naming convention. Very simple one. I'll do that.
That would be helpful. Honestly, if it were even just routinized, so there's just a routine that I could always expect the same thing.
Yeah.
It's funny, when we get to the point where, and we should get to the point where we're submitting to journals.
Yeah.
And doing all of that, there's all these professional forms, and whenever you go to the submission pages of journals, they always outline these forms, and you're like, oh, you're so tedious. Why are you impinging upon my creative genius in this way? And now I see why.
No, it makes it. Right. So even when I have to edit something I have written, I find that if I have spaced it properly, large size font, so it makes it easier. It's easier on the eye. Otherwise, I see dense text. Even though I have written the dense text, I find it a little intimidating.
Yeah, Yeah, and and this piece, this piece here, just in formatting, we could just say a little bit of that. Like this is dense text, and I've heard this too because I was fortunate to be able to study poetry with some really well one particular poet who was just great, and I learned a lot. That during my PhD, it was basically all I learned during my PhD was working with this poet. But the white space is really important for helping, again, creating the patterns. Human beings are pattern makers, and we want to create patterns. We want to create a welcoming visual space. And everything that we don't do in that regard actually ends up being reflected. Like even, I mean, I know it can seem silly, but these, attention, I think the attention to those kinds of details
Right.
start to, like, like it's not how I started because I started with, oh, what do I want to say? So that's all I was thinking about. But when we start thinking about these other details of the audience, we start getting into a better territory because we move into the territory between us and our audience, and it's
Mm.
this place that we actually have to be.
Right.
We we need, yes, we have our imagination, but we need to put our imagination into this mutual territory. And so those little things are it's actually a way to learn about the world. You're learning about how other people see things.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's that's what I mean. A small amount of writing just goes into really the big picture about what we're doing in our relationships. Um, this piece, so we don't have the author to read a section, but I will just tell you it's quite short. Um, but it's a nice little piece. This piece does something that I think we really want to concentrate on doing. We are not rocket scientists. We are storytellers, and storytellers are really working with one basic pattern. The one basic pattern that we're working with, I believe, and how about this? Once we become master of this one pattern, then we'll go to every other pattern. Okay? But let's become master of this pattern first, which is character, event occurs, an action. That event is usually a conflict with antagonistic forces. That is what that in fact I would say that defines what an event is. An event is a conflict with antagonistic forces. Lacking that, we have a non-event. So, uh, so character, event, which is a conflict with antagonistic forces, and character change. That's it. That's the pattern. Infinitely variable. You can go as shallow as you want, as they say, as wide or as deep as you want. You can do whatever you want with it. But the better we work with that pattern, that is the pattern of the storyteller. And this story does have that. We have a child who we're very involved in their point of view. He has a perception of himself. He's been waiting for something. He's waiting for this great information. He's assured that he's kind of all powerful and the best in the world. He perceives as this large world in which he's the best, and he goes and basically he meets reality, right? So, right, the antagonistic force is often reality. And this is another great thing about stories, again, essential to our structure. The character walks in with a subjective view of reality. They meet the antagonistic force. The antagonistic force is, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, reality. It exists, comes in, and the character is changed by their confrontation with reality, which is the antagonistic force, the rest of the world. So, and in that way, it is a story about subjectivity meeting, having an objective experience, and coming out changed. They don't come out objective, right? They're still a subjective character and see things within their point of view, but they've been changed somewhat by this interaction. And that's what that thing is what we can say something happened. Okay? If I really want to make that clear, it's like a story, when we have a story, we're basically saying something happened, and that's the thing that happened. Um, so this character comes in with these ideas. He rushes up through this crowd. I love there's a great detail of the child coming through with pointy elbows to get through. Those details actually are so good. We really want to, pick our moments for those details, but we love details. And then he gets to the front, and he does not see his name at all on this computer screen. And then at the end, we don't really find out that he's a small child until the very end, but he says, you lied to me, didn't you? I didn't get in. And then this is the line that's really great. Okay, you told me I was the best, Mommy. Why did you lie? Like, that's the great line here, because so this story does go on. Like, I make the note, so this is a story to me. I make the note that it kind of doesn't treat the child as seriously as I would like after this, because it kind of turns into, oh, Chris, sweetie, calm down. It's just an entrance exam. I'll sure you'll find another kindergarten. So the story becomes a little patronizing to the child. But the coming of age, the issue of coming of age, or even let's just say the issue of character meeting objective reality and coming out changed, I am going to say again, that is a story. That's a story whether the kid is 7, 17, 27, 57, 87, right? Does that make sense? That's, I think, such an important thing to understand. Like, it isn't for us from our subjective point of view to say, oh, that's just kid stuff. It is not kid stuff. That is story. That conflict between basically having an awakening of, I live in this world in which I have these belief systems. I have a worldview in which I'm great and wonderful and perfect. I have this conflict, and now I've realized that I'm not the only thing that exists in the world. That is the story that we tell over and over again. And that's a real story that, whether that kid is in kindergarten, and for me, the reader, right, that story can touch me if we do it well. And that means you have a real true audience. So we're not writing a story about a child and then actually, as an author, we're objectifying the child as being like, oh, what a silly kid. We don't do that. We actually take that kid and we say, that kid is a character. We've given them everything. We've given them our whole heart and our whole attention. And we're basically saying that this story is important for everybody who reads it. And we want to write it to that level. So like for me, and it's partially probably because, I have some, I just have training in doing this, because I've read so many stories. But like this story reminded me of, what do I have here? I don't seem to have a, anyway, I was reminded of James Joyce's Araby, which is one of the most famous stories that, it's like the one that's taught to everyone in the U.S. and I'm sure in England. Well, maybe not in England because Joyce is Irish. But anyway, that was a little joke. But it's a story about a kid. It's a coming of age story, and it's a classic. It's a masterpiece, and he's a master short story writer. His book of short stories is Dubliners. We should, if we're writing short stories, there's some people that we should have on our list, and Joyce's Dubliners is one of them. We should have Chekhov. We should have the American. I'm not grabbing it right now, but we should have the American. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm spacing his first name. Carver. Anyway, there's a great book called "What We Talk About When We Talk About Love." Definitely read that story if you want to be a short story writer. That's like those are if we think about Chekhov, then to Joyce, and then to Carver, that is sort of like a brief history of the modern American style, anyway, short story. Um, yeah, that's a good little primer. But anyway, I was reminded of James Joyce's Araby. It's a story about a kid, and it's a kid on this sort of romantic quest, and it has this phenomenal ending, lyrically phenomenal ending when he realizes that his quest, this romantic quest, and was a fantasy of his own. And that's a little bit what we have here, right? So I'll go back to this great line. You told me I was the best. Why did you lie? I mean, that's a great and actually a profound question. Why did you keep, right? Because a story like this, and every story, is, there was, I forget that English poet, Blake anyway. He wrote poems of innocence and experience, but that transition from innocence, which is what we can say naivete, or this sense that, whatever your sense is actually, whatever naive place you're at, transition to experience, basically having an event of experience so that your naivete is challenged. That's a profound moment. And the answer to that question, why did you lie, is actually, that's a big question, right? Why does the parent, why are we kept from reality? And what does that say about reality? Right? I mean, that really, that kind of blows my mind. I mean, it tells us that reality is something that we must be protected from. That's pretty profound. That's a pretty profound message. So I think that this story is beginning. There's a couple little things that I'd like to bring up in this story. Sorry, why are you being persnickety? Oh, come on. I'm not able to move this suddenly. Let's see. Oh. Okay, well, can you see just at this point here, this is not exactly where I want to talk. I want to talk at the beginning. So, in the beginning of this story, the child says,
Yeah.
The child says, this is my moment. I'm going to show everyone I'm the best. No, it says, I'm the best in the world or something like that. But there really isn't a way for the reader to understand actually what point of view we're in. So we don't really know how to interpret that. I think it's always good for us to, even from the very beginning of our work, to establish the point of view and the conflict immediately. But we want the reader to understand. So I've said this before, but I have to repeat it to myself. The reader does not read to find out what is happening. They read to find out what's going to happen next. So our issue is anticipation. We do not want the reader to ever feel confused about what is happening. And this is a very important point, and it can be a difficult point for us as writers, because it makes us feel like we have to explain what did happen. Not so. We do not have to explain what did happen. We just have to have it be clear what is happening. Does that make sense? We want to stay fixed in the moment, and we want the reader to be able to be, sure of what is happening. But when I read something like the best in the whole world, I don't know what the word world means. I know I'm being so persnickety, but that's what I mean. It's like, I don't know what that means. Because right when I'm reading that, I'm like, is this about Superman? Is this about someone who is the best in the entire world? I don't know. When we use the word world, what is meant by it? So And to do that, I can't understand what world means until I understand that it is this boy's world. Okay, the best in my world. And for that to happen, I need to have the boy there. Does that make sense? Because this could be, as far as I can tell, it could be a CEO, it could be the CEO of IBM. It could be Steve Jobs, right? It could be Elon Musk. I don't know. So I can't understand what the world is. So that means I don't know what is happening. So it's a small point, but I think one that's important for us to strive for, you know. And again, don't worry about what did happen. Doesn't matter at all. If the reader knows what is happening, they're totally happy. This is happening, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And this is exactly what we want to try and get our reader into the habit of doing, digesting perfectly what happened here, what happened here, what happened here, and at the same time building a sense of dread about what will happen next. And having an expectation, a hopeful expectation, and a dread about what's going to happen next as they understand what's happening here. And then this is a little point of view thing. I think the point of view could be a little bit tighter in this. So I marked this area here. This had started to attract attention. So though we're usually in the boy's point of view very closely, and then I hope the author will read Araby to see what that point of view feels like. Here we're like started to attract attention. Who's seeing that? So when I, as the reader, go into the boy's point of view, I basically am happy there. Okay, so now, and you can make me really feel his experience by leaving me there and seeing the world through his point of view. He's the protagonist, which means the protagonist is the character who changes. That's the protagonist. They're not the good character. They're not the hero. They're the hero in that they struggle through an interaction with reality. That's why they're heroic. So anyway, in this story, a little more attention to the point of view, and also the thing about paying attention to point of view is that's where our work is really fun. When we stop being a writer here, writing about characters there, and instead we become characters and see the world through those eyes, then when we do that, we recreate that experience for our reader. Then they become the character and they see the world through those eyes. And this is the fundamental thing that storytelling can do better than anything else. It can basically make a reader walk in the shoes, as they say, of a character, to live their experience. And that's the deepest kind of empathy that we can have. A non-objectifying empathy. We're not looking at someone, we are them, imaginatively. So we'll keep that in mind. But yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Thanks, Otis. This was great. And yeah. And she'll be delighted with this feedback. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So I really, it can be difficult, from my point of view. I don't always like the element of story. Character, meeting, event, and coming out changed is so ubiquitous in stories that we can sometimes not understand that that's what's happening. I think it's a really good idea for us when we read something to recognize that we have seen that pattern, and then really for us to try and also emulate that pattern. It is to me the first step of actually writing something that is a story. So this is a story. Now it's a question of making it a better story. That's it, but it's already here. The pattern exists.
Correct. So one question. So, you've talked about the point of view a couple of times out here, pointing out that it's not clear. Now, if one is not writing in the first person, and if one is using, the omniscient narrator's point of view, how do you manage the changes in point of view? Because they are obviously going to be, if one is adopting that omniscient narrator's point of view style of writing, then there will be shifts in points of view. how does one manage it
Right.
without confusing or creating doubt in the minds of the reader that which point of view am I reading now?
Well, so you want to have, so there's kind of some subtle things. I don't know what to talk about first, but you want to have very clear transitions between the points of view. So a point of view is like this camera that exists. Um, it's it's the way that the reader experiences the world, and it is probably the most important word to think about is it's a point. Okay, so there's different things that can happen. So what happens in this story is I know that I'm immersed. Okay, I'm acknowledging I don't understand this idea of the world. I don't understand what the world is. But I do definitely have the sense that I'm immersed in the point of view, which means that I'm seeing the world through, so there's a character, I'm seeing the world through them or close to them, right? So, and I'm happy when it's there, but it can be like, the boy, it doesn't matter whether it's third person or first person. We can we can often have an easier time with point of view when we write in first person because if we are able to be clearly in the character's point of view. But anyway, so we're with this boy and we're seeing the world this way. There's a crowd, right? And he's thinking, so we're in his point of view. But suddenly when we shift that point of view in another sentence to a view up here, now looking at him, right? So this is the thing that I'm sensitive to. I'm sensitive to being here, seeing the world this way, two eyes looking out, feeling, etc., being in that body or next to that body, right?
Right.
And then suddenly being here with somebody else. Because
Okay.
if I'm seeing the boy from here, from this distance, I also must be somewhere. And my question is, where am I? So again, I don't know. What you might be talking about having points of view where you have like, Jack, Jack's point of view, and then you might have Jane's point of view, right? So now you're switching, you're going, and you want to have what we call a hard transition, right? Where you're in Jack's point of view, but then it's like Jane looked at Jack. She thought Jack is a conniving rat, or whatever, right? So we established a point of
Ah.
view, and every time we switch from point of view, we want to establish the point of view.
Ah.
In this story, the point of view, I'm with the boy, but then suddenly I'm looking at the boy. So now I'm confused. If I'm looking at the boy, who am I looking through?
Correct. Correct.
So, but it's slightly different. So there's aspects of, and here we're really talking about the physical point of view because we can say the boy ran to the front. The boy ran to the front, right? So that's not shifting the point of view for me. I'm still with him in the majority, even though that's a narrator telling me what he's doing. He ran to the front, stared at the screen, the blinking lights overwhelmed him. He felt his heart in his throat. What has happened? Right? That's now heard, right? So that's heard by everyone and us. And then it says, he said, or he screamed. Okay, that he screamed is the narrator. He's not thinking that at all, but it's not part of the physical experience. So that's, the narrator is coming down to help us understand who said it. And so even though the narrator, so that's narrator point of view in a sense, but it doesn't really feel like a point of view. It's really just a helper. So,
Correct.
but if the narrator comes in and says, he was a boy just like any other boy, he didn't know better, this, that, or the other thing, if that happens, then that is a narrative point of view, a narrator's point of view. It's okay, but let us know that it is. So
Right.
so this goes back to my simple writing solution to this is if you're going to have those multiple points of view, not this narrator coming in and says he said. So that's simple. But if you're actually going to shift multiple points of view, multiple character points of view, character and narrator point of view, if you're really going to do that, separate them into paragraphs at least. Um, People who write novels, so there was someone in Stanford who wrote a novel with multiple points of view. A really good example of multiple points of view done better than this novel is called The Corrections by Jonathan Franzen.
By
Um,
Jonathan?
Jonathan Franzen, The Corrections. It's not it's not
Hmm.
totally even, but it is a great um, it's a great example of writing in multiple points of view, but he basically writes points of view in entire sections. So it's one character's point of view this whole time. Then he goes to another section, it's this character's point of view the whole time. And what's good in his work is that he recognizes how different the whole world and experience of the world is from a different point of view.
Hmm. Hmm. Correct.
That is one of the things to keep in mind. When you're writing Jack saw the world this way and Jane saw it this way and you switch points of view, those points of view have to be different. What happens in genre writing, right? Genre writing is more concerned with plot basically than character, let's say in general. And when you see points of view shifts in genre writing, they do it just because it's plot expedient. You need to be in the war room in the Pentagon, and then you switch point of view to be in a submarine in the Bering Strait. So what? You're doing it because you want to be in the war room and you want to be in the Bering Strait. The characters are not deeply perceiving the world. So like to read something like you know John le Carre, read John le Carre and then read Jonathan Franzen to see the difference between a plot-oriented point of view shift and a character-based one.
Got it. Thanks,
Uh,
Otis. I think that's very useful. Points of view and the transitions.
yeah, the the thing about the character, so that idea about, so if you have that character and having it be the physical point of view, I think that that's a really kind of a good point. I hadn't really thought of it that way before, but you're dealing with the physicality. Where is that point? Where is that point? And also, where is it pointing? I don't know if you remember the story that we read last year towards the end. Um, the guy had written about, this prince standing on a rampart overlooking the horizon, but then there's a sentence about what's on his back. And I go, poof, I go, whoa, how am I seeing his back? Where the heck am I? You know, when I'm looking out at the horizon line at that and I'm seeing the dust of the armies coming or whatever, I love that stuff, right? So the dust is coming, looking out over the horizon, and then I see what's on his back. It's not possible. So, like, it goes along with this basic idea. Like, we want to try and represent, right? We're not writing life. We're writing a representation of life using words. But every single person on earth has an experience of perception that works the same way. We're all locked in one point of view, right? Our own. That's it. We see forward, we hear from everywhere, we taste what we put in our mouth. We're all the same in regard to perception, basically. There are some people who have different kinds of perception, and writing about those characters can be really interesting. Um, another book, a real writer's book of short stories. Amazing writer, Anthony Doerr, and the book is The Shell Collector, a collection of short stories. He is a writer's writer, so like he's working with point of view, and one of his points of view is someone who's blind. Read that story. That's the title story, The Shell Collector, and you'll see that when Anthony Doerr writes the shell collector's point of view, he doesn't have visuals. He doesn't have visuals. And it's so tactile, and it's so filled with concrete detail and sound and all of these things. And he's doing that on purpose, of course, so that we have the experience of the shell collector. We're not having some kind of, outside experience. It's a very, I think it's our most powerful tool, but, basically the ability to go with point of view into character is our most powerful tool, and it achieves the thing I want to achieve in writing, which is to get my reader to have the experience of another life, to get out of their life and go into this life, in this world. That's what I like to do, but truthfully, the plotting thing is we're just as versatile. I mean, look at what we can do. Um, we had writers writing about being on Mars, like Ray Bradbury, way before we had the technology to represent that in any kind of reasonable way in the movies. So writing is an exceptionally versatile tool. It's a ridiculously versatile. So I can't fault the genre writers, and I love reading some genre stuff too. So there's not finally some kind of hierarchy. Um,
I had a question actually.
Dorella, nice to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And I would like to establish a point of view or different, like shifting different multiple points of view. Can we show setting? If I describe a setting, different setting, does that help in transition of different multiple points of view?
Right. So so this is what I think. So if we are going to shift points of view, just like if we shift time, if we shift anything, right? As soon as when we put the reader here by establishing point of view, which means we're establishing the character and the location and the time, right? That's the establishment, right?
Right.
So we do that. When we shift, we have to take this person out, but we have to do it thoroughly, and we have to put them in again. So that means we have to get them in that point of view. We have to establish the point of view, I say. That's what I write. Establish point of view, establish the time and the setting, time and location, and the action, because the action is time. So we need to then go into the new one. We have to do it every single time. If we, and this is the way I think it happens, so that's fine. So I write a chapter in one point of view, and then I write a chapter in another point of view. I think I've still lost something. Okay? So everything, it's a cost to benefit ratio. I hate to be, Ram, I'm going to go to the accounting, but that's what it is. So great. You have a benefit of having multiple points of view. What did you lose? There's no free lunch. Okay? We don't just get a free lunch in this world. You know? We lost, if I have 180 pages and I go into one character's point of view for the whole duration, then I have 100% of immersion in that character. If I go into 2 points of view, now I have 50% immersion into one character and 50% into the other. Right? But there's a further thing. If I have one point of view, other point of view, one point of view, other point of view, one, two, 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 I'm basically taking the reader and going, I'm throwing them around like an old piece of dough. Right? I'm doing something to them that they never, ever, ever do in their real life. I never, no matter how much I think that I know what Ram is thinking right now, I never actually know. I can never be in his point of view, never. So the more I do something as a writer that is completely unlike the experience of my reader, the more I risk losing my reader.
In a single point of view, we are putting the person through different, for drama, creating that drama. We are trying to put them in different settings and making them do a lot of things they not ready to do. So that way, we are also changing point of view in for one character also, a single character also.
Well, I mean, look at the story we just looked at. if we if we just stick with that boy's point of view, I'm telling you from from my perspective that that child's experience is potentially significant for me to read about because it's an experience one that I've had. But now what we want to do as a writer is we want to take it to a greater depth than our reader has experienced it. So you don't want to just write for me an experience I've had. Okay, I've had the experience of being disappointed. You want to probe that experience more deeply and give the reader something new, right? You want to expand the boundaries of the reader's experience. But I'm saying that even that experience with that boy, if I stick with him, can have a profound impact on me. That's that's what we're looking for. That's a significant thing to achieve as a writer.
Right.
Um, so so that's called going deeply into the character. Now maybe you want to go. You want to every time you leave that one. So every time you leave that project, you're going into something that's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more plotty. I personally believe if you have multiple points of view, like let's say, so my this person that was in my Stanford class, so she wrote a story that had 5 points of view. According to me, right, the protagonist can be anything, but the protagonist is the thing that changes. So if she wrote 5 points of view, that means the protagonist is 5 people.
Right.
It does also mean that my relationship with the protagonist force is complex. It also means that the end of the story is about 5 people changing, not just one person, right? So, I mean, these are the simple. I'm a kid of scientists, so I think I have some problems in this regard, but that's the way I see it. You just take on different responsibilities. Cost to benefit ratio. What is it that you want to do? You have to decide, and then you want to do that the best way you can.
You mentioned about making the choices. We have to make the choices here.
All we do is make choices. Writers make. I mean, we think we're making only one choice. No, we're actually making a choice not to do everything else. So once we start to recognize that, then we understand how many choices we're making. Every choice is also a choice not to do everything else we could have done. So we want to do everything we do on purpose to our point. And our point is, I think our point finally is to do two things: change ourselves
Right.
through the writing process and change our reader through the reading process.
Right. Yes, and also I have an observation, like you mentioned, that we always think from our point of view. So when I was writing the short story, I was trying to rewrite it and everything. I found it very difficult to put the character in point of view. So I was struggling a lot. That my nature was coming through the character. So the person is
Yes,
me instead of the person. So it was quite a struggle to write a short story. I found out once I.
right. So you're having the experience, right? You're having the experience that, like, let's face it, writing is a great job. Okay, it's a great job, and everyone in the world would be doing it if it was easy. Everybody. Okay, so typing is easy. Imagining imagining the life of someone else. Okay, again, this is an experience we have never had. We never have this experience. It is an imaginative experience to be able to go from you into another person and see then the world in a completely different way. You want to be as honest about it as possible and do it as well as you possibly can, I think. Because any degree that you fail to do it, the reader says, basically, this is bullshit, right? Hemingway said, as a writer, you have to have a really good bullshit meter. And what that means is not to see other people's bullshit, to see your own bullshit, right? And so so it's great that you're having the experience of understanding how hard it was and recognizing that you're putting you into that character, not that character. That is the first step to actually doing it. That's great that you recognize that.
Thank you.
Let's look at Ram's piece. I'll share again. I'll just let you know, if anyone chats with me, I am not one of these I'm not a multi person, so I will never probably see your chat or be able to respond to it. Focus has always been my thing. And I mean, you see that even when you see that I lose my focus even when I am focused. So, okay, this is Ram's piece. So in Ram's piece, let's have you read a little bit since you're here.
Sure.
Maybe you see this section here. Let's see if I can write. See that black line just there?
Yeah.
So aren't you angry? And down.
Sure.
Down to, what do you mean that the son born to you?
Yeah. Aren't you angry? I asked Ambika. Why should I be angry? Because it's Vichitravirya who will be marrying us, not Bhishma. So? What do you mean so? I threw up my hands in the air. It was Bhishma who carried us off from this Vayamvara. As per the Kshatriya code of conduct, he is required to marry us. A woman is first daughter-in-law of the house she marries into, and then a wife. Whether we marry Bhishma or Vichitravirya, we will still be daughters-in-law of the house of Kuru. Ambika was always the practical one. But the code of honor? Do you think the man who incurred the wrath of the kingdoms of Kuru Jangala to secure brides for his half-brother will break his vow and marry you? She sank the sharp point of a knife into a ripe apple, puncturing the skin. A drop of apple juice dribbled down the side, filling the room with sickly sweet apple fragrance. And be practical, Ambalika, she chided me. Vichitravirya is king. By marrying him, the son born to me will be the next Chakravarti. Not by marrying Bhishma, only a caretaker, howsoever capable he may be. Ambika's words pricked my ears. What do you mean the son born to you? Well, I am your elder, so it is natural that my son will have precedence over yours.
Okay, thank you. This is a great section, right?
Thank you.
So this is a great section because we have a character, mainly from my point of view, we have a character who gets on the page with his sister who has, we spent most of this story learning about the prodigious, the prodigiousness of Bhishma, and now from the point of view of one of the abducted princesses, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
She's sort of surprised that her elder sister doesn't care about Bhishma and instead is happy to marry the king. And who has a name, Ram? So you got to help me learn this stuff. You do not want to just have an audience for people who are familiar with Indian lore.
Okay.
That's where this is coming from.
Right.
So my rule is I cannot control who opens up my book,
Fair
but
point.
everyone who opens up my book, I'm going to keep.
Okay. Right.
I don't care. I don't care if they come from Bali. I don't care if they come from, the Australian outback or my neighbor next door. I'm going to keep them.
Okay.
The only audience I might not keep is my mom. I accept that my mother may not want to read what I write, but otherwise I want everybody. So
Right.
so just help us. But I love that the king's name means something like it's like bizarre masculinity. I think.
Yeah, I mean this is from the Mahabharata. So this is actually a story that will be part of an anthology written by multiple authors. So Aditi, who is here, she is curating that anthology. So because this was going to be a part of that anthology, so I have presumed a basic knowledge of the story of the Mahabharata. So yes, you are right. That is something for me to think about, that the story, anybody who opens it, they should be able to sink into it.
Okay, look at it this way. Okay, so Ram, so it in a sense it's a it's mythological, it's foundational to an entire culture.
Right.
It's a story that people know. So on the one hand, you have to think about what do you give that's more than what people already know. So that's one of the questions.
True.
Right? And then how do you also give this story to people who don't know it? Because like I'm saying, I'm serious. We want everyone to be the author, everyone to be our reader.
Yeah.
I read stories from Greek myth, Russian myth, Chinese myth. I read, of course, the Grimm's fairy tales. I read Native American myth. I read all of these to my children. Right? You can think, and if you read those, you see that they are accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
And they're incredible and wonderful stories. And I think that that's one of the things that might be even the point, right? So someone could read the Mahabharata, right, and get this story too. But if they're not reading the Mahabharata, they're reading your work. So your work should be more accessible. It's the same story reaching a new audience. That's part of the point. So I would keep that in your mind and have it be so that everyone, could read it. And that might mean that the narrator might have to come in. Like, let's say that name means, as I was assuming, this sort of, weird masculinity. One person is sort of synonymous with, this sort of prodigious masculine efficaciousness, right? Which is like, in the Homeric epics, it's very similar that they have these things called Homeric Epitaphs, and actually the oral literature. There have been studies on it, which you probably know. They have similar patterns and similar kinds of development because they serve similar functions for human beings and work along with the human mind, basically.
So referring to the hero's journey.
Right. Well, there's the hero's journey, but I'm actually talking about this little thing. The Homeric epitaph is like brave Achilles, wily Odysseus.
Right.
So, like, that little thing, what that does is because in oral cultures, there was no ability to keep track of abstract information. There's only concrete. So the way you understand bravery, right, is that you associate it with the actions of Achilles. The way you understand, the way you understand being wily or being strategic is you add it to the story of Odysseus and what he did, because there's no way to retain abstract information. So I think that's a little bit what you're talking about here. But honestly, I'm a freaking PhD, so I mean, I'm not your typical audience. Not everyone's going to get that.
Fair point.
So then in this story, okay, so we have the basics, Ram. I know that you can do this yourself at this point. Because I've had many people that work with me that are like, they'll do this. They'll be like, I like this a lot, but I think Otis would say that I need to establish the point of view, that I need to establish a conflict. It's like, so let me serve that function like a little parrot, on your shoulder.
I like that parrot, by the way. I like that parrot.
So when we start, we're like, okay, you got to establish the point of view in the conflict. Yeah. What's the story?
Right.
If I don't feel like something is happening, and I don't care about what happens next, I do the proverbial.
Close the book, yeah.
Yeah. So this is the basics for us. So we have to do it. And there just isn't. I know we want to tell ourselves, Ram, I'm with you. I've done it all, okay, to try and justify why this time in my story, it's different and it doesn't need to happen. I've gone through it all.
No, it does. In fact, I thought when I said that the two sisters have differing views of the city, I thought that established the conflict, but maybe it's not coming out that obvious. Maybe it's like
I don't know the story, so
yeah.
you have some code words there for some people who know the whole story, and but honestly, I think you still have the issue of you have to make it new. So you don't want someone to open up that first word and say, "Well, I know this story," and then close your book. Nor do you want me to say, "I don't know what the story is," and close your book. You don't want either of us to do that.
Yeah.
So you have to suggest, even in the beginning, how Ezra Pound, who was a fascist, by the way, so let's be clear, Ezra Pound said, "Make it new." So that doesn't mean that. So that's an important phrase. We're not inventing the story, but we are responsible for making it new. We didn't make the story pattern. Our ancestors made the story patterns, and they made the story patterns because they're like life. So they didn't even make them up themselves. They weren't geniuses who invented it. It's character, event, change. That means something happened. They didn't always know what happened, but they knew something did. Same with us. So yeah, so we just got to do it. We got to figure out what we're bringing to the table that's new.
Right.
And then you have, I'm not sure, no, it's not there. You have this beginning setup. So since that story isn't established, I don't know what to do with it. So the way you're writing it right now is like an envelope.
Right.
But the envelope is usually something like, it's something where I really understand. It's like, Robespierre looked up from the corner of his dungeon. What do you want for your last meal before you take that long walk? It's like, I'll have the steak tartare, you bastard. Then it goes, right? So I'm established Robespierre is about to be executed, and then we go back to young Robespierre is, dashing through the fields, and he loves butterflies, right? Whatever it is.
Right.
I know what I'm getting back to, and I know what the next steps are, right? Because it's the same way as everything we do. You can stop the story when you take the reader off the cliff. When they have an expectation for what's going to happen next, then we can stop the story. And we can only stop the story for as long as that expectation for what's going to happen next is going to remain.
Right.
So it has to be on their mind. If we're going to write 80 pages in between, we have to have them walk off a cliff where they're going to fall 80 stories to certain death. Again, not to be too mathematical about it, but there's a math to it, right? There's a kind of simple equation.
Right. I get that. Okay.
When we have the envelope or go into any backstory, just like Sorella, we're talking about point of view. In the same way, when we change times, we have to start the story again. So like when you change points of view, you have to start the story again from this point of view. When you change time by going into backstory, you have to start the story in that time. So now we need to establish point of view again, and we need to establish the conflict again. And this is also extremely important. The character, in this case, we have a character in a front story, right? This woman, the princess.
Yeah.
And we have a character in the backstory.
Right.
These two characters are, this is going to blow your mind, Ram. These two characters are different.
Yeah, I realize that, yeah.
Because this character here has had the experience of the backstory.
Right, yeah.
So she has to seem different. This character is naive. She has not had the experience of the backstory. So we're really dealing with two characters that need to feel distinct. You see how fun our work is, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's great.
Right.
Okay, then I think this is this is just this is in the envelope part of the story, but I just want to I really want to embed this pattern. So again, once we've mastered this pattern, then we can do every other wrong pattern. But let's just do the one right pattern first and make sure that we're experts at it. So when we want to stop the text, as in something is happening. So this is just an example, okay? I'm not sure that it's going to end up being effective even written, but I just want you to have the pattern for sure. Okay, so do you remember Oblika? Sorry, I can't.
Oh, sorry.
Can't
Yeah.
pronounce
It's
properly.
not. Yeah.
The day we entered the city, she asked me, right? And then you write, I nodded. How could I not remember that day? Okay, so that means we have, so when this part, do you remember, that's an action, that's dialogue, a character is saying that. Action. We have
Right.
action. If we
Right.
want to stop the action, we stop the action in order to raise the stakes to the next action. That's the pattern we want. So that
Okay.
means we write this way. We write, do you remember the day we entered the city? She asked me. Then we go into how could I forget?
Okay.
Da 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 da.
Okay.
And then we say I nodded. So
Okay.
that's the
Got
basic
it.
pattern.
Okay. Okay.
Action, stop the action, right? And you'll notice that that's exactly the same as the front story, stop the action, back story, back to front story. It's the same pattern. Our patterns are actually, speaking the Mahabharata and coming back from the oral traditions, our patterns of storytelling are the same as they were in ancient times.
Right. Okay.
So we have and they're the
Right.
same.
Okay. Right.
Readers do not know this, but we know it.
Right.
And they never tire of getting things exactly like they've gotten them before, but made new.
Right.
But they definitely get tired of seeing things that they've never seen before and make no sense to them.
Right.
We have very patterned ways of thinking. So we'll just do those patterns.
Okay. And this is very useful. Thank you so much.
And then my next thing with this is just about realism. Okay, so
Right.
I think so I box. Okay. So I used to box. Okay, I cannot have any more massive head trauma. You can already see that it's taken its toll.
Right.
But I can box one person. Okay, you have a lot to deal with. You have that person, you have two hands. I mean, we're not even talking kickboxing. We're not even talking weapons of any kind, right? There's a certain distance, etc., and they could do anything.
Right.
Okay, I know personally, it is phenomenally occupying. My ability to fight two people is 0.
Okay.
You have a prince who fights a whole bunch of princes.
Yeah.
Okay, they all have weapons.
Yeah.
The likelihood of you being successful in that is very slim. Because a boxer is going to punch me from behind my back. This goes back to point of view, right? Human beings are social animals. We have our eyes in the front of us.
Yeah.
I watch your back, you watch mine. Like if there
Sure.
was someone looming behind me, you would tell me, Ram, wouldn't you?
Of course.
No, you wouldn't.
No, of course I would. I don't. I told you I like that parrot. I don't want it hurt.
Okay, but anyway, this is the way
Right.
human beings are because I
Right.
can't see behind my back. So
Right.
that's point of view, right? We've developed a certain kind of point of view. We're not like gazelles that can see all around.
Right.
360. So we're dealing with realism a little bit, and so I think you either have to go one way or another. So the new thing you could be bringing is, since you're taking a mythological story, you
Right.
could try to bring realism to it.
Okay.
Or you could be depicting the mythological story.
Right.
So you make a choice, but make it clear to us what choice it is.
Understood.
So when you go into this woman's point of view, my expectation is that I'm dealing with realism. right? Because
Okay.
I have a woman who's on a chariot and she's seeing things. That's realistic. And so
Okay.
we share that objective world.
Okay.
So then I have a conflict with given things that are not realistic. Um,
Okay. No, I see where you're coming from. But the in the world that in which I have put this story, he is actually that capable. So he's capable of fighting a number of people at the same time. So maybe I need to work on it too, or because if that is what I have in mind, maybe I have to create that word
I
for
know.
it to be.
Yeah. I'm watching Marco Polo right now, and they have some, the if, it's true. The Chinese are making some great movies, some great
Right.
martial arts movies, and I would love to see some of the Mahabharata stories uh, turn
Absolutely.
into turn into movies that are like. I mean, the Chinese are clearly doing it in order to develop a sense of tradition and nationalism for their right. They're doing it
Right.
for nationalistic purposes, and uh, and I don't know if you have movies
There
also
is
in
one
India.
actually on YouTube. Actually, the famous one is by B.R. Chopra. There's a series of Mahabharata, but that's in Hindi. You have to turn on the subtitles for that.
Are
That
they
was very famous actually.
So this is like a 185 episode series,
Yeah.
and it has the record of having the highest viewership on BBC UK, by the way.
really?
Yeah. So when it aired in BBC, it had the highest viewership in BBC UK. Of course, I'm sure it has since been overtaken by maybe some football matches since, I don't know. But
Can
at that
you
time, it had the highest
send
viewership.
send me a link?
I'll do
Um,
that.
the the uh, the production values. I mean, I've just been watching some of these, like Ip Man and some others. The production values of some of these Chinese movies are just phenomenal. But anyway, so
Right.
so even when we see these sort of, these martial artists basically that are so capable. So like I myself, when I'm watching, I mean, I can get caught into, it looks great, right? There's 8 guys around one guy,
Right.
but it's the way that we all understand the way you film a martial arts movie. One guy fights them, then the other guy fights them. Okay,
Yeah, of course.
so like, like the you know the German hordes that destroyed Rome, they didn't fight like that. They didn't
Right.
go one at a time. They just
Of
are
course.
blah. You know,
Right.
um, they're like, what the hell? I mean, lunge, and if you get a rib, you get anything, you have a big advantage. Um, you just have to work on making us believe it. So
Sure.
that's the thing. There's a very famous story. I'm going to share with you one of the most famous stories from writing workshops about Barry Hanna. So Barry Hanna um, taught this workshop, and I actually I knew him, and I asked him about this story. And there's a story of him. Someone had written a story in which um, they wrote, and he pointed a gun right at my face, and I didn't feel anything. Okay, that's what the student wrote. The next week, Barry Hanna came in, and he took out of his bag a gun, and he pointed it at the student, and he said, "Tell me you don't feel anything." That makes a point, I think, about the human animal, right? So we're still dealing with the human animal.
Right.
We have to figure out how to put the human animal on the page.
Right.
So, you know, yes, this guy, this cocky writer was like, "That's how tough I am. I can imagine a situation I don't feel anything." It's like, but we're animals that
Right.
feel.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we do. So you got to figure it out. Like
Okay.
whether you make it so that there's 8 guys and one attacks and then another attacks, or there's 50 guys and one attacks and another attacks. I think I made the point to Abhinav, even about his story where they ran up the stairs. I was like, you run
Yeah.
up the stairs, your legs are tired.
Right.
We don't
You remember
sprint up
that.
the stairs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just the kind of thing I want you to think about,
Right.
because in the end, I want to go back to this idea that we're writing, but we have a reader on the other side.
Right.
And we're trying to figure out how to meld our experience, which means that you have to take in the way the reader understands the world, and the reader understands the world actually just like we understand the world. So what's our common ground? It's not to say that we can't go to magic or we can't go to myth or any of these things. We can, but we have to make sure we bring everyone along.
Yeah,
So we're
that's right.
understanding, we have to just keep us together, basically.
Right.
Like I had to comment. I actually did one good thing for a writer at Stanford. She'd written a story and she wrote from a boy's point of view. And the boy walked up to a house, and the mother came out of the house. And the way it's described is she wore these shoes, and she had this dress and an apron and hairpins, and carried a shotgun. And I was like, okay, the boy, I don't know about women, but the boy sees the shotgun first. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So that means the shotgun has to be here, and then you have to deal with the rest. I'm sorry, right? And she changed that, but it's just, to me, it's just true. We have to deal with reality, the reality of human beings.
Right.
And to the degree that we don't, we have to somehow be able to explain it, right? And so, like when I go to the martial arts movie, it's not that it's being explained to me that they're coming one at a time, but that's what I am seeing, and so therefore it explains it to me.
Right.
So that's and then the other thing with this piece, you take on a huge degree of difficulty as a writer in terms of going to the big thing that we do, which is imagination, by one, writing from a woman's point of view, and then writing from such a historical woman's point of view.
Right.
So I don't know what work you need to do to help me understand how you can make to make that real. But again, you got to go to the audience. So right now we have a character who is basically seems to be abducted. I mean, and maybe she's being raped. I mean, she's been pillaged. It's like the rape of the Sabine women. I don't think the Sabine women wanted that, right? I don't think. Mm-hmm. So if it's going to be okay, you have to figure out how you bring me there too, right? Mm-hmm. So like you can make that transition, but you have to really make it. You have to really know that character, and you also have to bring me along so that I can accept it. Because again, the moment I don't accept it, I distance myself from the work, and now you're losing me, and we never want to do that with any of our readers. So,
okay,
it's continuous problems for us, right? So, like as we're saying with Sorella, it's like constant problems where we're making constant choices to solve those problems. I mean, it's like a hugely prodigious task. Luckily, there's some things that are not that difficult, like the writing, like the patterns that we need to engage in. But everything else, the imaginative issues are, we're problem solvers, and then for me, just to go back to this section that I really enjoyed so much, the reason this jumps off the page is the characters become real for me.
Okay.
Right? Like the sister, basically here. The sister becomes real. It's just, it's already plotted in the work. And the thing, when you go to the Mahabharata or you go to the Odyssey or any of these stories, any of the myths, they are great stories.
Absolutely.
We just have to bring it out. We know that they're great stories. We know this because they lasted. The great stories last. They worked. So we want to take what worked from them and we want to bring those up even more. And you know what works for human beings so well is when we feel like we read something and we understand ourselves better from reading it. And that's what I start to get when I start reading about the sister, because I'm like, yeah, That makes sense. She's like looking out for her kids. I get it. You know,
Right.
I understand I'm not necessarily supposed to like it from the point of view character, but I also understand it and it seems real.
Right. Okay.
If you could show me the guy being able to defeat 20 guys, I'm going to read that with as much interest because, like I tell you, I can only box one person at a time. So I am very excited to figure out how I can handle
Okay. So I didn't spend time on that
multiple.
because that was not the primary point of the story. So I just did spend time on that.
I, so again, we're always just making choices. So the
Right.
thing is, sometimes if you don't want to deal with something, you
Leave
don't.
it out completely. Yeah.
Like if it gives you
Right.
problems,
Yeah.
you're like, he was still sweaty and grimy from the battle. Um,
Hmm.
I I pulled out my handkerchief, but then thought better of it, put it back in my, whatever.
Right.
And anyway, the main thing we want to do is show we don't really care about the battle because that's not
Yeah.
the story. Right now,
True.
she's
True.
either in the beginning she's leaving the
Hmm.
town or she's been abducted and she's on the chariot. Either way, what happened before doesn't matter,
Yeah.
and you don't want to deal with what's going to happen because we're going to find that out.
Of course.
Keep us in the moment. That's
Right.
that's usually the solution.
Right. Okay. I'll make a
Um,
note of that.
yeah. So I mean, look at that poor kid who Barry Hannah pointed a gun at his head. Um, he he was a terrible drunk. He's the guy that wrote to me, "Your story meanders like a drunk on a bender." That's what he wrote to me.
He could identify. So that was maybe he's talking about my himself.
But look at it. If that writer had wrote, if that writer had wrote, and he pointed a gun at my head, and then he
Right.
broke, and then gone to the next scene, Barry Hannon never would have done that.
Yeah.
It's only because he wrote, "I didn't feel anything," that Barry Hannah had to teach him that lesson.
Yeah.
I will just tell you this story that many years later, I was at a racetrack with Barry Hannah, and I asked him if that story was true, and he said, "I never pointed a loaded gun at any student."
Wicked. Yeah. Wicked. That's wicked. That's wicked. Yeah. Interesting. I will remember this story. Maybe I'll use it somewhere.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you that is a good storyteller.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is a good storyteller.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Um, all right. I think any questions?
Yes,
We
I
still
had
only
one
two
question.
stories and we still went an hour and a half. Come on.
We did.
I,
We did.
I had a question actually.
Yeah.
Suppose I am drawing inspiration from text, historical text or mythology or any academic text. So when I create the first line or the setting, and to be true to myself and also to the story, to bring the story to the reader, do I have to start with the setting of of the story from the mythology? Would you advise me to do that, or just go straight to the drama and create the drama from the first line itself?
So I think it can be a great idea to maybe, like if you have your piece and there's maybe just a quote that like can like get us, enter us into some understanding of the context of what your piece is. I think that could be a good idea. I might just do it as a little quote.
Okay.
Um, and then continue to I really think continue to think about what are you adding to this story. Like if I were to rewrite Romeo and Juliet, the question is why, right? What am I doing when I do it, right? So um, if you saw the Leonardo DiCaprio version, I forget who was the director of that Romeo and Juliet, where they modernized it and they put it in Los Angeles, and you know whatever they had guns that were called sword brand guns. They did all this stuff, but basically what they're doing is trying to bring Shakespeare to a new audience,
Right.
right? so they were doing a very traditional rendition of Shakespeare, but ideally for a new audience.
Right.
What are we doing? Malcolm Gladwell in the United States, a New Yorker writer, he's extremely good at bringing some science. He's not informing scientists of anything, but he is informing non-scientists of some things in science. And he's made a huge career of bestsellers by doing that. So, changing your audience, deciding exactly who your audience is and then what you're adding. That's really the big challenge. And what I would think, and this also speaks to your work here now, Ram, is that we have certain when if I read about Odysseus or I read about Achilles, I'm reading about someone who feels very old, right? If I read the Iliad, when I read a modern story, I feel like I really know that character, that they're really real. And so I think bringing that degree of realism to this thing that was old, it's really interesting about the oral literature is that it was absolutely real to the people who heard those stories. What they heard, that was all there is. The storyteller talked, and it was just simply the truth. It's all they had. We have some different issues to contend with in the modern world, so I think it would be great to try and bring those characters into the modern world so that I can know them like I know my Aunt Agnes. That would be an amazing accomplishment, right? To bring them out of the past and make them relevant in the moment.
Point. Right.
But think about it and do it as you will, or you could do it, or the other way to do it is to retain all the aspects of myth about it, and then present that to a new audience. Like I would love to read all these stories to my girls. I love. In fact, I actually have read. I do have some of the stories. I read the story of Ganesh. Those are they're wonderful, and so that's them bringing stories that you know well to a new audience, right? Again, but you think about it. Do you want it to be literary for a literary audience? Do you want it to be,
True.
inclusive for, an audience of all ages? Who exactly are you writing for and why?
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing, and this is something that I figured reading plays. So there is this very famous Norwegian playwright called Henrik Ibsen, and I think Henrik Ibsen plays are a fantastic study in how to create the personality of a character. So he introduces a character, and within maybe two dialogues, you are unambiguously clear of what the character's personality is. So I would very strongly suggest that people read Henrik Ibsen plays. Particularly, there is this play called Hedda Gabler. In that,
Gabler, for sure.
it's spectacular. I mean, the Hedda Gabler walks in, and in two lines, you know what she is. I mean, I think that's amazing.
Right. So, keep in dialogue. I've already said it, but David Mamet said a character doesn't always say what they mean, but they always say something to get them what they want.
Yeah.
So actions of character. Sometimes people will argue like, I don't know who said what. There's too much he said, she said. The fact of the matter is, if you have to tell someone who said it, you have not written good dialogue. Every character represents themselves in what they say, absolutely, because they're trying to get what they want.
Right.
Right? And that should be clear. And what this character wants and what this character wants can never be the same. So they have to always be distinguished from each other. You would never say, I want an ice cream, I want an ice cream. There's no difference between those characters. But yes, Ibsen is great. I grew up on those plays.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. I'm glad we got started again.
Yeah.
Ashvani, Happy New Year. Aditi, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank
Happy
you.
New Year.
Happy New Year.
I'm not sure that a lot has changed.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll see you next week.
Yeah, but one thing has
Yeah.
changed, Otis. We have changed, at least all of us who have been regularly participating in these sessions. I think over the course of the last 2-3 months, I can say for sure for every participant that we have changed and we have grown. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
absolutely.
thank you for
While
saying so.
writing,
I really
yes.
appreciate that.
Did-
Well, I
did-
really enjoy working with you all. It's a high
Same
point
here.
of
Same
what
here.
I'm doing, that's for sure.
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay.
Otis. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Otis.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Yeah.
Good day. Bye.